What are you hoping for in this PMQs? What do
I'm
you want to get out
hoping
of it?
for some spiky questions from Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer responding with all the grace and self-assurance he has done over the past 6 weeks or so of Labour headaches.
Grania, is there a weirdness? We were talking about this earlier, but a weirdness to the fact that it's still Rishi Sunak. He's up now. We'll get his first question pretty shortly. No, he's not up. He's not up yet. Later we will.
Why is he bothering? Why did he even put a suit on? Do you know what I mean? He should have just worn t-shirt and shorts.
Coming in his animal onesie.
Yeah, he
just carried on.
He must be so jet lagged. Like, what time is it right now in LA?
Has he just been in LA?
I just
He's
always assume
in LA?
he's always just got off a plane or helicopter from LA.
Does he not deserve some credit for sticking around, for not having handed over to whoever the Tories' perennial equivalent of Harriet Harman is?
Yeah, do you know what? I think he does. Good for him. I would like if Keir had arrived wearing a Taylor Swift tour t-shirt.
Nice, yeah.
I think that would show some chutzpah.
Well, or indeed if Rishi had, that'd be good.
Well,
Yes.
they weren't cheap. They're about 40 quid, so Rishi can afford one.
Hands up, like I know we're on video, but we won't tell anyone. Hands up who didn't pay for the Taylor Swift tickets.
I paid for mine.
I paid for mine.
Yeah.
I got swindled. I paid for Taylor Swift tickets from it on Facebook like an idiot.
Oh no, and you didn't even get to go.
I didn't go.
What?
It's a very sore issue for me.
I've said this before, but we had the worst, like literally the worst seats it was possible to have in the whole stadium. So if I had been offered free ones, while it would be embarrassing now, and I'd have struggled talking about it over the last endless amount of time, I nonetheless would have had a better time. I think we have the first question, so let's go to the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow the government will publish their anticipated changes to employment law. Given the weekend's events, when did the Prime Minister first become a convert to fire and rehire?
Well, I'm very pleased and proud that tomorrow we will publish the bill which will be the biggest upgrade of workers' rights in a generation. And that'll do two things, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, it will give people basic dignity at work. And secondly, it will help grow our economy, something that the last government absolutely failed on for 14 long years.
Okay, so Patrick, that was a concealed Sue Gray question.
Yeah,
right?
it was not as blunt, fire and rehire. It's quite convoluted. Morgan McSweeney was once the Prime Minister Chief of Staff. Wasn't for a bit, now is again. I guess.
Yeah.
If you are, but, Keir Starmer didn't really engage with that subject. I imagine we're going to be hearing a lot more of that sort of thing from Rishi.
It's a bit disappointing, Grania, because you sort of think, you want him to go in properly on Sue Gray, right? You want him to say this is my Sue Gray joke, so that people who aren't necessarily paying full attention can get it, right?
It felt a bit in-house.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like he's on his way out.
Yeah.
He could have gone out in a blaze of glory. I think he'll regret that.
Yeah. I think it's. Have you got any good Sue Gray jokes you could recommend instead?
I mean,
to
not
put
off
you on
the top
spot?
of my head. Not off the top of my
Come on,
head.
work,
But I think he
Grania.
should have been like, hey, Sue Gray. She's had a tough week.
What about that? Yeah, I don't see her here today. Yeah.
It's mad because Morgan McSweeney, I used to work for Morgan McSweeney.
You did. You were on Morgan McSweeney's podcast,
Yes,
right?
I didn't know.
This is in my I should interview. This is in my history of the Labour Party.
It's so mad. I feel like Lord Haw. I had no idea what I was doing.
Tell me about Morgan McSweeney's podcast. Was it fun, light-hearted banter?
It was funded by Labour Together.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be just like a moderate look at the Labour Party, but we were given a script, basically, that we had to read out. And I'm the most stupid person in the world. And even I, halfway through, was like, are we propaganda? Because the money was so good. I cannot tell you. The money, it was glory. It only lasted for about 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And we did well.
Was this a Lord Ollie project?
I think it was.
Oh
and
my
I had
gosh.
no idea. I had no idea.
So there are you on your high horse without you not having had free Taylor Swift tickets. Turns out you were the press TV of the Labour Party.
To be fair, I heard it took you quite a long time to get paid. No, this is sorry. I should do my interviews off air.
No, you shouldn't.
It took quite a long time to get paid. Nobody listened. Was the longest lot of it.
I think people definitely did not listen. But I have to say, so Morgan was quite hands-on with it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, you're amazing. I thought he was so clever. And I was thinking, if only somebody like him could run the country.
Right, well, there you go.
Well, and here we are now.
Here we
It was
are
a
now.
monkey paw wish.
Living in Morgan McSweeney's Britain.
The fact that to talk about something a bit more serious. The fact that Keir Starmer segued there, Patrick, to talk about workers' rights, that, like, he's not just doing that off the cuff. He's thought to himself, if anybody mentions anything about Sue Gray or Morgan McSweeney, I'm going to go in on workers' rights.
Yeah, and look, that's the government's big announcement this week. That's the thing they hope will seize the initiative back, the new package of workers' rights legislation that Angela Rayner is going to announce tomorrow.
Right.
Whether that's going to distract people from the ongoing bin firing number 10 is another question. But the government, at least, unlike for the past 6 weeks, has something to say.
Well, look, we've got.
It isn't commentary on itself.
We've got question 2. Maybe this is going to be the real Sue Gray kicker. This is the one that he's been sort of like gearing up towards. Let's hear it.
The opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, when he talks about security at work, once again, it's one rule for him and another rule for everyone else. Yeah. But I know that not everything or everyone has survived his first 100 days in government. So can he confirm that when he promised not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, that commitment applies to both employer and employee national insurance contributions?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, as he well knows, I'm not going to get drawn on decisions that will be set out. We made an absolute commitment in relation to not raising tax on working people. He, of course, was the expert's expert on raising taxes. And what did we get in return for it? We got a broken economy, broken public services, and a £22 billion black hole in the economy. We're here to stabilise the economy, and we will do so.
I don't know, Grania, I'm a bit disappointed here. It's like, it's the second question about Sue Gray in which he doesn't say the word Sue Gray. It's like she's Voldemort and he doesn't want to say her name.
She's too powerful.
She's too powerful, yes.
I think it's a missed opportunity, because if you're it should be like a summing up of what people think about Keir Starmer's government so far, and nobody's thinking about, even I can't even remember what it was, some tax, interest rates,
whether income tax and VAT are going to, I'm sorry, I stopped listening.
I've fallen asleep. It should be like, hey, gone to any good concerts over the summer? Oh, I like your suit. Just gone into beach.
Oh, man, see, it's not Morgan McSweeney who should be in charge of the country. It's you. It's you, Grania. Patrick, what was that question really about?
I think it's always quite hard to tell with Rishi Sunak. But look, I think what the leader of the opposition, sorry, I can't say Prime Minister anymore, the leader of the opposition is trying to lay the ground for there is a peroration, test me on the 6th question, where he'll say something like broken promises, yada, yada, yada. They don't have a plan. Don't even have a chief of staff anymore, whatever. I mean, that seems to be where this is going, this idea of chaos. Quite a strong answer from Keir Starmer, I thought, though I did know as Rachel Reeves heard him talking about tax in the budget, she looked completely haunted. A real 1,000-yard stare on her part.
It's one of those deadlines that hangs over you, going like, I've got a free afternoon on Thursday. I'll do the budget then, because if I don't get it done then, I'm going to have to not be able to go for lunch on Sunday. And the stress of it.
You can study between the exams.
Okay, we've got question 3. Fingers crossed for a better one. Here, let's see.
Leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think even Lord Ali is buying any of that nonsense. I'm not asking, Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking about the budget. I'm not asking about the budget. I'm asking specifically about the promise he made to the British people. So let me ask him again, just to clarify his own promise. Does his commitment not to raise national insurance apply to both employee and employer national insurance contributions?
We set out our promises in our manifesto. We returned with a huge majority to change the country for the better. And I stick to my promises in the manifesto. But I notice it's question 3, and it hasn't yet welcomed the investment into this country. We've had in recent months £8 billion from Amazon for jobs across the country. £10 billion from Blackstone's jobs across the northeast. £22 billion on carbon capture jobs in the northeast and the northwest. 500 million, Mr. Speaker, for UK buses in Northern Ireland. While we're investing in our economy, what are they doing? They're arguing about whether to scrap maternity pay.
Okay, there's a lot going on there. Grania, look, we had our Lord Ali
Yeah.
opening there. Was that good? Because you're saying even Lord Ali isn't buying any of that
Conceptually,
nonsense.
I wasn't sure it worked.
Well, because he's not buying anything really. He's just paying for other people to buy it. He couldn't have said even Lord Ali isn't paying for you to buy that nonsense. It doesn't work.
But I just thought, at least with snappy, and I appreciate it was like a snappy little reference, and like
Yeah.
most topical jokes, if there's a reference, it doesn't actually have to make sense.
Right,
So I was like, fair enough, and I enjoyed it. But then it got ruined because the front bench were just like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Then I was like, it's not that funny.
It's like when you invite your friends or relatives to your stand-up gig and they overlaugh,
Yeah.
thus discrediting the laughter from everybody else. Patrick, the meat of that question, I'm going to try and drill down on this. Why is he trying to pin down Keir Starmer on whether the commitment not to raise national insurance applies to both employee and employee? Is there some thing pickling away that?
He is suggesting that the government is going to wiggle out of the promise it made, i.e. no rise in VAT, national insurance or income tax, by hiking national insurance but not the bit that comes out of your wages.
Right.
And the way the Tories will spin that is that another Labour tax on business, even though separately they promised no new tax on business, incorporation tax, they'll say that's a job killer, it'll kill investment by businesses, etc. And for what it was worth, actually, I thought Keir Starmer's response was pretty strong in terms of all the new jobs that have been created under this government, if not by his government. That's an important distinction to draw. But it'd be one to keep an eye out in the budget, because Rachel Reeves needs to wring out every penny out of the tax take this budget, not least because all the taxes she planned to rise, Treasury officials have told her, actually, that won't raise as much money as you thought. So it's one to keep an eye on. I bookmark that if you're looking forward to the budget.
I'm very much looking forward to the budget. Of course I am. Grania, the government's strategy generally at the moment always seems to be they're asked about anything and they go, oh, well, can't talk about that until the budget. Can't talk about that until the budget. That's the sort of constant deferring of everything.
Yeah, and it's bananas. What do they think newspapers are going to talk about? If they're like, we're not going to give you any stories, any policies, any hope, what do you think they're going to talk about? They're going to talk about your suits, your glasses.
Got to talk about something. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think they're egging it up a little bit too much. And I think, it better be good.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, we've talked a bit about, on this show at any rate, about the argument about whether or not the budget should have happened sooner, precisely just to sort of to fill that void. Because there has been... Like I am in the same way that I'm getting a little bit tired of the 22 billion. There is also sort of wait for the budget, which works to kick the can down the road. But eventually, you do get to the end of the road.
Yeah, exactly. And also in terms of news management, I think it was a mistake. And I speak to senior people in Number 10 who now say it was a mistake, particularly given how weird Labour conference was and how overshadowed it was by commentary on, everything but what was being said on the conference stage, and people in Number 10, and Sue Gray, etc. The actual right order might have been they came in, they did a King's speech, they did a budget, and then they'd have something to talk about at a conference and through the autumn, rather than, we'll do a King's speech, but everything we announce in it is subject to how much money we'll announce the budget in 3 months' time. We'll have a long summer where nothing happens, enter, Lord Ali. Then we'll have a conference where no one can really say anything either. Then we'll have another month, then we'll finally get to the budget. And that's a lot of wasted time for a new government that need to seize the initiative and the narrative.
It's also it leaves you thinking that, like, the best case scenario is that we go from having one kind of government to a completely different sort of government, right? Because the way things have built up, they're going to have to put a lot of stuff in the budget. The budget is basically the programme for government, even more than the Queen's speech was. And it leaves you thinking, are they suddenly going to sort of turn on a sixpence post-budget to being, hey, we've got a billion things going on, from having, like, we've got nothing going on?
Yeah, the budget is now basically, given we've written off the first 94 days, Sue Gray is gone to whichever nation and or region she has been sent to today. Sue Gray is gone. So the budget really is the launch date of this new government, which seems a strange thing to say. What's that? 3 months and 4 days after they won the election, but here we are.
Right, okay. Now, so, Grania, it's roughly in your area. I know this is technically the wrong country, but he was talking about £5 million for UK buses in Northern Ireland.
Yes.
What does that mean? Is UK buses a brand of bus in Northern Ireland?
I think what it is, one bus driver is going to have the best day of his life. We don't know how this money has been given out. It could be a game changer.
Driving around going, woo! Okay, I think we have our next question.
The opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to welcome investments that this government negotiated, but when it comes to his answer on tax, Mr. Speaker, businesses across the country would have found his answer just about as reassuring as Sue Gray did when he promised to protect her job, Mr. Speaker. So let me turn. It's no wonder confidence is plummeting on his watch, which he didn't mention. But turning to another commitment, before the election, his Chancellor said changing the debt target in the fiscal rules would be tantamount to fiddling the figures. Does he still agree with the Chancellor?
Prime Minister.
This is literally the man who was in charge of the economy. 14 years they crashed the economy. And what did they leave? A £22 billion black hole in the economy. Unlike them, we won't walk past it, we will fix it, and it's only because we're stabilising the economy that we are getting the investment into this country. But I still notice he hasn't really talked about that investment. We're powering ahead with clean British energy. We're changing the rules to build 1.5 million homes and returning railways to public ownership. And they've got nothing to say about any of this.
Okay, so he said a name at last, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said Sue Gray. He said he must have found it about as reassuring. Businesses must find this about as reassuring as Sue Gray did when he promised to protect her job, which is like, it sort of works.
It's not the snappies. He should end. If your joke thing is Sue Gray, he should have ended on Sue Gray.
Yes, exactly. It's a written joke. It's not a spoken joke.
Yeah. It's more of a
Yeah.
ha ha ha.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I thought, Patrick, the way he went into that, basically saying, "I'll always welcome investments that this party negotiated when he was in government." Yeah, because Keir Starmer listed these investments that were coming to Britain, and Rishi was like, "I'd welcome them because we negotiated them." I thought he spent that killer point awfully cheaply.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in that question.
It wasn't there.
There was the Sue Gray joke. Which is, you could, as
banger,
Grania has,
banger.
it's a banger, and you could get away with that as a question in itself. There was the defence of the Tory record on investment, and then there's also this separate point, and they are onto something here because it's something you hear a lot from business and business leaders. The separate point that this government is losing its way in terms of its engagement with business, that business is losing confidence in the government, that they promise the world to everybody, be it the EU or business or individual voters, and now nothing seems to be happening. That's a pattern across a lot of the stuff Labour was saying in opposition and what it's doing in government. And business feel that particularly acutely. So I think Rishi Sunak was sort of onto something there if he wants to rebuild Tory support in their traditional, business constituency. But if that was the point, it was hard to discern it from the gag and the slightly mealy-mouthed defence of his own premiership. But
we also had, and you're right when you say it was a very busy question, we also had the debt target. That was also in the same question. So the debt target, he quoted Rachel Reeves saying before that raising the debt target would be tantamount to fixing the figures. The debt target being the amount of money the government's allowed to borrow. It looks like that's exactly what she's going to do in the budget, we think. So you'd think that could have been a killer question, right, Gonya?
The whole thing kind of read like a text message from my mum with this absolutely no punctuation, and it's just big one run-on sentence. I'm fascinated. Like, what do you think is Rishi's thought in this? Is he being like, see, Tories, look how amazing I am. Look what you've lost. Or is he an eye to post like PM future? I'm trying to think what he's trying to do.
He doesn't sound bitter, does he? He doesn't. Well, you think he's just sort of demob happy?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say he's demob happy. I mean, he probably would rather be anywhere but there. But he's just sort of working out his notice. All he has to do is this one thing a week, and then that's it. He literally does nothing else.
Right.
That's the long and short of it. Right. The whole machinery of the party is focused on electing a new leader. He just has to turn up one day a week, sound vaguely coherent, and then go home.
Raising the debt ceiling, or whatever it's called, which I think was the real point in that, is that going to be? Do you see that as being a major part of the budget?
Yeah. Look, Labour have chosen this budget to start making a political argument for investment, which the left in this country has been too scared to do for a very long time because they think, look, it only ends one way, particularly if you're trying to do it from opposition with a poster that says tax bombshell and with Labour not winning election. Now they're in office, I think they realise that investing is the only show in town, particularly if they are serious about driving up growth, and also in terms of what do people see in 5 years' time, even if things aren't rosy. Well, they'll say, look, there's a new dual carriageway. Well, I was going to say at the end of my garden, hopefully not at the end of people's gardens, because that's not going to get... There's a new dual carriageway down there. Look, they've rebuilt the hospital. My kid's school has just got an extension. That sort of thing. if those things are at least in train in 5 years' time, Labour are confident that they can present an image of dynamism and getting things done to the public, as they've discussed at Cabinet recently, and that is the big test. And it'll also be a test of Rachel Reeves' political instincts. Something I hear from other Cabinet ministers basically is that Rachel Reeves is just parroting what Treasury officials tell her, and that we know Treasury officials tell people is please don't spend any money on anything at all and cut everything. Yeah, exactly. So it'll be a test of that, and it'll tell you the direction this government wants to go in for the next 5 years. So it'll be very key, the shape of that change to the fiscal rules and how much borrowing and investing they're prepared to do.
Gráinne, if the Chancellor goes on to do the exact thing that she said she wasn't going to do we still mind that?
I think what we were dealing with Rachel the Brown,
right,
and now we're dealing with Rachel the Red. Very two different personalities.
It's like she's fallen from the bridge in the underworld or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So I really borrow and spend, baby, borrow and spend.
That's fast. I'm amazed you've just sort of thrown that away in one line. There's a whole column in that. Rachel Reeves as Gandalf. I think that's fantastic. I think should we get the next question?
Mr. Speaker, on debt, we left them the second lowest debt in the G7, Mr. Speaker. And as the Institute of Fiscal Studies have said...
Order. I will hear the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, as the Institute of Fiscal Studies have said, it's hard to escape the suspicion that the government is attracted to this change because it would allow for significantly more borrowing. Now, his Chancellor previously said that this change, and I quote her words, would be fiddling the figures. So it is a simple question. Does he still agree with the Chancellor?
Prime Minister.
I see it's back to his old script. They've never had it so good. That didn't work so well at the election. Might be time to change that. I'm not going to get drawn on issues for the budget, just as he wouldn't when he was standing at this dispatch box. But meanwhile, we're investing, we're building the NHS fit for the future, back on its feet, better opportunities for young people and protections at work. After 14 years of Tory failure, we're giving the country its future back. And that's the difference that Labour delivers.
Okay, we'll come to the meat of that question in a minute, but Gráinne, the fact that there was a bit of admonishment from the Speaker, I love a bit of admonishment from the Speaker.
Oh, I miss John Bercow, don't you?
No.
I miss his, he was like a carnival caller. Mm-hmm. I liked the theatre. I loved when it seemed like Rishi had really got a real gotcha question. Yeah. That the Tories all were like, like a Greek chorus.
Yeah.
It's very pleasing.
It just reminds you of the whole, when you hear the Speaker coming in and going, no, stop that, and everyone sounds just says the same but sounds a little bit guilty about it. I know, reminds me of school. Patrick, that's right back on the raising the debt ceiling stuff, yeah?
Yes, it is. And this is clearly something the Tories will go on and on and on about over the budget, not least because it appeals to traditional weaknesses in how voters perceive the Labour Party. But I think the key there, in terms of the political impact of all this, was in Keir Starmer's response, i.e. voters were not willing to listen to the Tory party on the economy before the election. They're still not willing to listen to them because, look at everything Liz Truss did, how Rishi Sunak... And this is something Labour are keen not to do, by the way. What Rishi Sunak did in his question there, say, well, I'll have you know that our debt levels were the second lowest in the G7 when I left, and isn't that brilliant? The one thing this government knows voters don't take kindly to is a politician saying, well, I know you think your life's terrible and you can't afford anything, but can I show you this chart from the Institute of Fiscal Studies?
Which says you're wrong.
Yeah, which says you're wrong and you should be grateful, because I did that graph.
Yeah, okay, let's get our last question.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear he's opened the door to raising employer national insurance contributions, including on pensions, and fiddling the figures that he can borrow more. And he talks about what he's achieved. Well, economic confidence is plummeting, growth is now stalling, and the UK's borrowing costs are rising on his watch, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, can I close on another important topic? Because yesterday's intervention from the head of MI5 will have been sobering for the whole House. And not least his warning that Britain faces the most complex and interconnected threats in our country's history. Now, I know the Prime Minister will agree with me that we all owe our security services a debt of gratitude for what they do to keep us safe. But can the Prime Minister confirm that the forthcoming terrorism bill will give our security services the powers they need to tackle evolving threats And I can assure him of our constructive support on these vital questions of national security in the same spirit that he provided that support to me.
Prime Minister.
Well, I can confirm that we will give the security forces and services the powers that they need, and I hope that is a shared objective across the House. They do an incredibly important job for us. But he talks about the economy. It's a real shame the party opposite can't simply... Well, he did at the beginning of his question a moment ago. Listen on. It's a shame they can't celebrate Britain's success under this government. Of course we've got to take tough decisions. But when investment is pouring in, as it has been in recent weeks, when the NHS strikes are coming to an end, when houses are getting built, we're delivering the biggest upgrade of workers' rights in a generation. It's time for them to accept that we're fixing the foundations. So whilst they fight amongst themselves in the comfort zone of unfunded promises, threatening to scrap the minimum wage, we're going to get on with the job of clearing up the mess that they made and fighting a better country that people are crying out for.
Comfort zone of unfunded promises is a good line. I'm just not quite sure. Yeah, whether it's used quite rightly there. Look, Patrick, let's take this. There's a couple of things there, but let's take them in turn. Firstly, it's bold for Rishi Sunak to say economic confidence is plummeting, because what he means is it's plummeting from the boost it got when we got kicked out.
Yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. What for the Tory leader to say, you came in with such high expectations because people hated me and me specifically, and you're failing to live up to them. It's a bold gambit, and that's the problem the Tories are going to have again and again and again, whoever leads them. Ultimately, it is only 3 months since the country decided we want to kick these people out to the brink of extinction. And it's going to be very, very difficult for them to overcome that, I think, although stranger things have happened. I mean, that was quite the monologue from Keir Starmer there. Suffered a little bit from, and this was quite shrewd from Rishi Sunak, changing his tack so violently there to say, oh, by the way, can I ask you a really, really serious question and pledge my constructive support? And you could hear in Keir Starmer's voice a sort of slight panic, a slight uncertainty, because he was expecting, oh, I'll just do the knockabout and then do my soaring peroration where I say, I'm great and you're terrible. But the transition, you could hear the gears grinding there, because he was sort of like, how do I make this segue work after my little statesman-like thing about counter-terror legislation? But yeah, I'm glad it's over.
Grania, the pivot there to MI5 and terrorism, bang! I mean, it's disarming, right?
I love that. Was amazing. It was like petty politics. You're rubbish, but guys,
Can
seriously.
we talk about terrorism? Yeah.
It's like he should have had like a stool. Like if he was on a stool, that's when he would stand up. It's a real key change in a Westlife song.
I was good. Yeah.
I think why didn't Keir such an idiot? Why didn't he start on the petty stuff and then go to finish up? But I do agree, and then just end on the counter-terrorism thing.
It's like at the end of a sitcom when it's like, and this is the message that we learned.
Exactly.
Yeah,
The Jerry Springer, but
exactly.
seriously.
Yeah, look after yourselves and each other. Well, that brings us to the end of the main exchanges from PMQs Unpacked. Next up, we will bring you the best of the rest from the back benches. the exchanges at Prime Minister's questions in the company of a pair of Maguires, Grania and Patrick. I was going to say unrelated, but apparently not. Who knows? Look, we've had the main questions from Rishi Sunak to Keir Starmer. We've also been listening to the backbench questions, so you don't have to. But first up, let's go to Ed Davey.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across this House, we all agree that we need to get our economy growing strongly again so we can improve people's lives and raise the money for our public services. Liberal Democrats believe that one of the best ways of doing that is to improve our relationship with our European neighbours on things like trade, and I welcome the fact that the Prime Minister has made this a priority in his first few weeks. But what I just don't understand is that he's ruled out negotiating a youth mobility scheme with our European partners. This could be so good for young people, for businesses, and for re-establishing that relationship. So will he reconsider this?
Prime Minister.
Well, he's right. We do need a better deal with the EU than the bad deal we got under the last government. And that's why I was very pleased to meet the President of the Commission last week to talk about how we can improve on the deal. In our manifesto, we had clear red lines about the single market, customs union, freedom of movement, and we will negotiate with those red lines in place.
Okay, so that's Ed Davey there. Well, here in the studio, we could only hear him and not see him, so I, for one, chose to imagine him in a wetsuit. But look, there's a Europe question. Patrick, before we get into the absolute detail here, do the Lib Dems think that Europe is sort of one area in which they can sort of, do the running against Labour?
Well, that was really interesting because before the election, the Lib Dems were very keen not to talk about Europe at all, and certainly not try to outflank Labour from its more Remainy, from a more, whatever the Remainy equivalent of left and right is, from a Remainy position. That sounded like we are going to hear more and more of that from Ed Davey over the course of the next 5 years, couched very specifically in an economic argument. Now, they were unwilling to say it quite like that before the election because they were worried about the impact that would have on Tory voters. Maybe they now think they've found the right sort of message to be pushing on Europe, i.e. it's good for the economy. Keir Starmer's response is very interesting too. Treading an uneasy tightrope, I wrote about this in the Times last Friday, between wanting to sound emollient and conciliatory with Europe and wanting to strike a big new deal, but also, what was he stressing at the end there? His red lines, which Europe is increasingly looking at and saying, well, you're going to have to give us something. A negotiation isn't just you turn up and you're nice and we say have whatever you want. So it's tricky. But it's very interesting because it tells you what the Lib Dems are likely to do over the course of the next 5 years, because they are in a tricky position with, they know they can campaign against the Tories, but where they position themselves relative to the government is a difficult question for them.
Grania, when Keir Starmer said we're going to get a better deal with the EU than the bad deal, I had just this terrible flashback to the incomprehensible no deal is better than a bad deal, where you kept thinking, which kind of no, do you mean not a deal? Do you mean a bad, what is, are there no deals better than a bad deal? You know what I mean? That we had that sort of sentence drummed into our brains for so long, and I just had a proper spark back to it.
I don't know. Maybe I'm being naive, probably. But do you think after all the trauma that there's been since the Brexit vote, that kind of the question of cooperating with the EU feels less traumatic? Maybe people have got maybe a bit more pragmatic about it. Maybe it's not as emotional an idea as it was previously.
You mean it's just a thing now?
Well, it's just like this is something that a government has to do.
Well, but what's going to be fascinating, I think, is in the next couple of years, we are going to see impacts of Brexit, for those of us not lucky enough to have Irish passports, of course, who, the impacts of Brexit hit people where it hurts, i.e. it's not going to be an abstract thing about GDP or businesses and red tape. People will have to pay, the tenner to get their visa waiver in Europe. They are going to have to queue at the border if they are driving. And I do think when that stuff starts to bite, you'll have a big audience of people who just go, hang on, this is awful. You know what I mean? It becomes a terrible retail politics proposition. It's no longer an abstract cultural thing. And then I think you'll see the Lib Dems use that stuff to push Labour into a position of much more conciliatory sort of...
I mean, I think you're probably right, but we have been kind of saying that for 10 years now, and it's, well, anyway, we'll see. Look, just to end on a happy, upbeat note, finally, let's hear David Davis talking about assisted dying.
Davis.
On the assisted dying private members bill, the government's quite rightly staying neutral. But the real issue with that bill is the time constraints of private legislation make it very difficult to get it right first time. If we get this wrong first time, the consequences are too terrible to contemplate. In 1967, the government of the day gave the government time to allow David Steele's abortion bill to go through. Would the Prime Minister commit to giving extra time, out of government time, to this bill to ensure that we get this right first time?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for raising this question on a really important issue. And I do understand there are strongly held views across the House and on both sides and within both sides, if I can put it in that way. I do agree with him that it is important that we ensure that any change to the law, if there is to be one, is effective. Now, if this House gives the bill a second reading, it will, of course, then go to the committee as usual, which will allow that more detailed scrutiny. But we do need the discussion more broadly on this important issue.
Okay, so a bit of a non-answer there, but Gráinne, it's always a bit of a sort of a corrective, a reality corrective, when you're reminded that as well as sort of like bickering about sort of treaties and budgets and all the rest of it, they do actually sometimes have to decide these proper existential questions, like things like assisted dying.
And I think that's an issue particularly close to the Conservative Party, because a painless death was what they faced, 3 months ago. So I think it's a raw topic for them. I think it is good that every now and then something like this comes up in Parliament, but maybe isn't Prue Leith? She's involved in this, isn't she? Or am I losing my mind?
Yes, she is. She's a big advocate for assisted dying. Interestingly, her son, the Tory MP Danny Kruger, is really, really against it.
That is interesting.
I've spoken to Prue Leith about this before. Very boringly, she just said, well, you know,
there you
we're
go.
both adults with different opinions. I was expecting her to brief against her own son, but there you go.
How depressingly reasonable. Look, is this going to be a big fight in Parliament, this dying bill, or do you think it's going to be handled with sort of sombre respect?
I think the government is doing all it can to take the wind out of it, even in Cabinet, where there are several ministers. Shabala Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, which is interesting given the role of the law in all of this. Wes Streeting has reservations. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, voted against it when it was last up before the Commons in 2015. But, you know, the government has said our official position is neutrality, and you're not allowed to voice your opposition if you are opposed, which ministers think is a sort of conspiracy to shut up people with doubts about this. There are lots of new Labour MPs, younger, not necessarily schooled in these debates, who will basically just say, well, you know, the Prime Minister's for it. It's a good thing. I think it'll basically pass pretty easily because of that. But it'll be interesting to see if people with reservations feel empowered to speak up, given that the mood of the House and the mood of the government seems to be tilted towards letting it pass because it is the, in inverted commas, right thing to do.
Well, look, I'm afraid though that's us out of time. But thank you very much indeed, Patrick Maguire and Gráinne Maguire, for PMQs Unpacked, the two best Maguires outside the Spider-Man universe, I would say, absolutely. And you can listen back to that on the Politics Unpacked podcast, or indeed share it with your friends, should you wish. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio in association with SSE. Find out how they're transforming Britain's networks at sse.com/change.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with Barclays. This afternoon from 4, join broadcasting powerhouse John Pienaar for an expert debrief of the daily news agenda.
What's happening behind the surface? Are there tensions?